Hello folks, hope you're doing well. This will be an interesting one. Yeah. Well, last night I was in that, what they call a discipleship thing for the men. And they were talking about, breaking the cycle. And what was brought up was things like pornography. So I was like, okay, interesting point. Then I was watching something where there was a bloke challenging modern young women about their view of men. And he was actually saying to the woman that men are programmed to want more than one woman. Certainly sexually. Not necessarily as a wife. They wouldn't want 2 or 3 wives. One wife. But then they often go to another woman sometimes for sex. And he said, it can even be what's counted as an ugly woman. It doesn't need to be an absolutely gorgeously beautiful woman that the man cheats on. It could be an unattractive woman. Yeah, what people deem as. And yeah, the women were quite sort of, right, okay. And after watching that, suddenly, boom, 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 an understanding hit me, and it made complete blinking sense. Complete sense. I know it came from God. Well, let's first of all look at what the Bible says. The Bible says that you should be the husband to one wife. That's what the New Testament says. Okay. Well, in the letters, they didn't have the space or time to write a massive explanation as to why adultery was such a common thing and such a popular thing. Because, of course, to my understanding, certainly if you've been troubled with pornography, or you've been troubled with gambling, or you've been troubled with bad relationships, or you've been troubled with having a dysfunctional dead church, you can't move forward until you understand what was going on and how you got there. Certainly if you don't want to end up there again, you need to understand how you got there so you can avoid getting there again. Right? That makes sense. Learn from your mistakes, you don't keep on repeating them. That's the quick way of putting it. Bambi can hear another dog barking. Well, people out the back, their dogs bark all the winking time. So, yeah. Anyway, okay. Now, so understanding that, God started to show me that, one of the ladies in these videos was saying that 8,000 years ago, and she was wrong on this date, she was saying that 8,000 years ago, one man mated with 17 women. That was quite a common thing. It was common far less than 8,000 years ago. Way far less. And the reason why is war. War has been common since, really, people were created. You had the first war between Cain and Abel. And it just continued. Now, in war, certainly big war, the men fight, the women don't. So if you have a long, big, massive, long war that lasts for a long time, your population of men gets massively decreased. So at one point, you might have one woman for every one man. After a war, and a big war, whether you win or lose, it doesn't matter, because you're going to lose a load of people, even if you win. Because wars were messy. They've always been messy. With the weapons we have now, wars can be won a bit quicker, but they were always very messy. And people who had stab wounds from the swords or knives, there was no way of healing people at that time. So people died over really nothing. Very, very common. And if you fell over in a skirmish at war, you probably get trampled on. You die that way, you suffocate under the other bodies. So death was very common in war. And as it was men going to war, it was the men that died. So any man who actually survived the war and came home, suddenly it was their job to repopulate that country. Well, because now you had maybe one man to every 20 women. Therefore, that man was expected to do his job. Because you had maybe, I think this is where the idea comes from with the Muslims, that if they die, they go to heaven and get 17 virgins, because most likely, if you went to war in those days, anything from 500 years ago beyond, you would come back and most likely in the land that you lived, you'd have 17 virgins waiting for you. So it was important, very important, for men to be attracted, at least sexually attracted, to various types of women. Not just one. Because if those men were just attracted to the one woman, all these other women would never actually have sexual intercourse because there wasn't any men. They wouldn't therefore breed. They wouldn't have children. If they didn't have children, they certainly wouldn't have men to fight wars in the future. Your civilization would be wiped out. So there is good reason, or there has been in the past, good reason why men were supposed to be attracted to pretty much any woman. There's good reason why that was the case then. Not anymore. Generally speaking, we don't go to war. Nowhere near as often as they did then. This is not something that happens there. We don't live in that sort of tribal ways that they did then. That isn't the case. I mean, that's part of the reason why, when we see in movies about the Vikings and stuff like that, that's why they used to take women back. Because it was really important to have multiple women. You can have more children to build up your armies. That's what it was all about. It was all about armies. A lot of people think, they took the women because it was spoils and they just wanted to rape the women and stuff like that. No, there would have been a better reason for that. Yes, of course, some of the women would have been highly resistant to what was going on. And that wouldn't have been good, obviously. But the reason for it would always have been, you've got to replenish your stocks of people. So, if you go into someone else's land and you win that skirmish, then against the men, then you take the women. You add them to your women. And therefore they become the mothers of the next generations. Mothers and grandmothers, aunties and whatever of the next generations. And that was always important. Because in those days, wars and invading and being invaded was always going to happen. They didn't have Netflix. They didn't have computers. They didn't have, Twitter that they could be looking at their phone all day, checking, see if someone sent them a message or someone's liked their last, words or video, So therefore they invaded. They went to war. Right. Well, even that's the point. You go to war because you've got an army and you've got to make sure the army is up to scratch. You've got to make sure if you're invaded, then your army can actually fight. The only way really to do that is test them in a war. And so you go and pick on a nation or an area that's smaller than yours, where you're going to win. Of course. That's what you're going to do. But that's what those days demanded. The problem is that we've recently come out of that, but that mindset in men is still there. And it is. We have to be honest about this. That mindset is there in men. They do desire pretty much most women they see. That is true. Most men don't do anything about it because they don't have the opportunity. This is why Yeshua said, when you look at a woman and lust after her, that's adultery, because if you had the opportunity, you would, because it's in you to do so. It's more so in men than it is in women. For that very reason. Because women never went to war. So therefore there was always plenty of women left with the few men. So therefore the women had to share one man. So it's not in women's nature to try and procreate with as many men as possible. But it is in the nature of man to do that with women. But as I say, there was very good reason in the past. There isn't now. So if you understand the nature and understand why you have it, but understand it was important then but it isn't now, now you might have a chance of actually beating it. But you've got to understand it first. And that was cool. Understand that, yeah. Because men don't understand it. Men in church don't understand lust. They think there's some spiritual thing going on. No, it isn't. No. It's inward. It's in you. And it's not something you can turn off. It's something you need to understand and understand what it's all about. And you need to learn to deal with it. Because you can deal with it. But you can't deal with it until you understand what it is. Because then you understand it actually has no power. Because when you think it's something spiritual, because in that thing last night they were talking about the fact that every 3 weeks or every 3 months, it comes up again, and they think that there's something going on in the spirit world that's causing that to happen, or something like that. Well, it isn't. It's something in you. Now, of course, is it a case where, because one of the chaps was saying on Facebook, you'll get images come up of sexy women and stuff like that, and you'll delete them, and then 3 months later it'll come up again. Yeah, I mean, are there people at Facebook trying to send you that stuff, trying to get you interested in it? Yeah, of course. And if you haven't responded to any of that, they will send it again. Yeah. Of course, that is the case. But you being interested in that, and you being interested in women, and when you drive past a very attractive young lady, the reason why you turn and look again, is because of the fact that you're programmed to do that. It's in your DNA to be interested. Because your ancestors had to be. Your ancestors, if they survived the war, it would be their job to mate with all those different women. So they had to find them attractive. Yeah. Yeah. As I say, that's the truth of the situation. But trying to explain that in the letters to the churches would have been quite complicated. So therefore, they just said, ideally speaking, you should be aiming for that. Which is correct. Yeah, you should. Well, hopefully this helps people to understand and maybe, start winning their war against lust. But as I said, we need to understand that lust was appropriate for that. And, for that to be in men was appropriate then. Definitely. So understand it. Don't hate it. Understand it. Yeah. But there you go. I'm going to leave it to it. You take care. God bless. I'll speak to you soon. Enjoy. Be a blessing. Be blessed. And, have a fantastic rest of the week. Bye bye.